Welcome back. Brighten-Up-Sunshine. Every day is a new beginning. Today, I was just wanting to talk to you guys because there's been some things on my mind lately, and that is just the fact that when we start scrolling, how much have you wasted your whole day scrolling? You're not alone. It's almost like an addiction. It's hard to break. And it got me wondering, why is it so hard to break? Could it actually be some form of control that is being used on the masses without the masses knowing? It isn't like that's never happened through history before. And so just one thing led to another, and I started kind of studying this, wanting to know for myself, and I thought, interesting subject. So maybe I should talk about it with my audience and see what they think. Trying to lighten this up so you guys can see the adorable art today. It's a heavy subject to talk about, so we might as well have something pretty and kind of cool to look at. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Pharaoh's magic. There is a battle going on for our soul, guys. There's a battle for our soul, and it's a real battle. And the Bible talks about it. We're going to go through some stories today of Daniel, Meshach, Reshach, Abednego. We're going to go way back in history. We're going to take, let's see, where are some other things we're going to talk about? Ancient governments and how they actually have historical facts where they've used some control before. It's one of the reasons the Puritans came to America. Oh, this is going to be good. So buckle up because we're going to go through it. And here we go. So the story of Daniel, Meshach, Reshach, and Abednego. Okay. Actually, it's Daniel, Meshach. I call it Reshach, but Shadrach and Abednego is how some others have pronounced it, who are basically central figures in the book of Daniel in the Hebrew Bible. And it's the Babylon exile. The year is 605 before Christ. And this is after King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon defeated Judah. Then he took a group of these young Jewish nobles and the royal family members to Babylon. Now they were royal, okay? That's something people don't realize, including Daniel and his 3 companions. So King Nebuchadnezzar defeats Judah, and guess what? Now the royal families are still alive, and they're going to be took over to Babylon. So today, we're just going to talk about some of this magical art that's been used to control the masses for very many centuries. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. And this, like I said, goes all the way back to the year 605 before Christ. So King Nebuchadnezzar decides, all right, we're going to start training them in the magical arts because that's basically how the country was ruled, and Daniel was part of the royal family that they just conquered in Judah, so let's train him as well, along with his 3 friends. So this event is actually part of the larger Babylonian captivity, which lasted for several decades. And there was training going on in the Babylon culture, as we've just said, and he wanted to integrate these young captives into the Babylonian court. And to do this, they had to be educated in language, literature, and wisdom, which, let's see, it included various mystical disciplines. These arts involved astrology, divination, interpreting of dreams, and magical practices, which were common in ancient Babylon, and religious governance. So why magic, we might ask? Well, because the Babylonian society and government were deeply intertwined with religious practices they thought were their religious practices, okay? I'm not talking about the Judeo-Christian practices. We're talking about what we would look at and just say witchcraft. Or maybe not. Maybe it's become watered down. That's what we want to talk about. So this included astrology, magical rituals, and divination. And guys, I'm not going to be able to read the comment, but please talk amongst yourself and I'll read it at the end. But I do want to thank all of you for stopping by here. So rulers like Nebuchadnezzar often relied on priests and magicians to interpret these omens. and predict the future and influence the gods. The training of the Jewish captives in such arts were likely a way to incorporate them into the ruling class practices and to make them useful in advising the king Nebuchadnezzar. The learning of these practices may have also been part of the assimilation strategy to get them to kind of serve in Babylon and erase the culture of their religious identity of the Jewish exiles. So the divine intervention and resistance, though. The young men, however, remained faithful to their God and refused to engage in the practices that conflicted with their religious beliefs. For example, they even refused to eat the food they had been offered from the Babylonian gods, and were later tested at a trial that they survived where they danced in the fiery furnace. The three younger ones, the Reshach, Meshach, and Abednego is what I call them. But I know it's not Reshach, it's Shadrach. But anyway, that's what we read about in Daniel. Their faith was tested, and Daniel, of course, got through into the lion's den. In many ancient cultures, magic was seen as a powerful tool to influence both the supernatural and the mundane. Governments often employed magicians, astrologers, and priests who had the knowledge of such arts. Why? To maintain control, ensuring the success of military campaigns, predicting agriculture yields, and safeguarding the ruler's power. These practices were actually seen as having a direct connection with the divine and were often used by rulers to assert their legitimacy and control over their people. So this is, again, why Daniel and his companions were trained. It likely was to make them knowledgeable of the arts so they could serve the king. And then we're going to look at the Knights Templar and King Arthur. It's intertwined with legend, mysticism, and magic. There's some actual historical facts about the subjects that are more complex and less magical than the myths suggest, though, is what some say. Both the Knights Templar and King Arthur have been connected to magical themes over time, largely, though, like you can see some movies about it, and some people are saying it's folklore and literature, but there was some actual magic that they used. The Knight Templar were a medieval Christian military order founded in the year 1119 after Christ, or Common Era, and during the Crusades. So really not that long ago, like 1,000 years ago. I know that sounds long when you barely live 100 years, right? But they were originally established to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. Over time, the Templars grew in power and wealth and influence, becoming a significant force in European political warfare. The Templars were known for their distinct white mantles adorned with red crosses. However, the ideal of the Templars using magic and alchemy and occult practices mostly arose from what some say are myths or conspiracy theories. Historical Templars. The historical Templars were not involved in magic, though they did engage in rituals as part of their religious and military duties. The primary role was to protect Christian interests. This is just what the opposition is saying, or the other side, or whatever. If you believe different, that's fine. But the historical facts want us to believe that the Templars were not involved in magic. They were involved in military campaigns during the Crusades, and they built castles, and they had a vast financial resource and engaged in banking activities. So mythicals are the myths of magic and occults. The connection between the Templars and the magic is largely a product of later legends after the order of the Knight Templars were actually disbanded in 1312 by Pope Clement V under the pressure from King Philip of France, who actually owed them a lot of money. And rumors began to spread about their secret rituals. Some of these rumors included claims that the Templars practiced occult arts such as alchemy and worshipped a mysterious idol, and I can't pronounce the name, but I've heard it, and so I will spell it for you guys. It's Baphomet, and I know I would kill it if I tried to say. So these rumors were amplified by the trial of the Templars, where confessions were extracted, of course, under torture. The Templars' influence in occults. The Knight Templars have long been associated with Freemasons and various different traditions. The idea that they possess secret knowledge, including magic and alchemy knowledge, had been embraced by some modern-day societies and occults. A mystical society founded in the early 17th century called Rosicrucians. And that's a very interesting whole nother rabbit hole to go down. But the Rosicrucians, and I feel like I'm killing that too, so I'll spell it. Rosicrucians. And some of them say they've even built some things that are standing today. Okay, many modern occult groups claim to draw inspiration from the Templars, including these Rosicrucians. Probably should know how to say this before I read it to you guys. But however, there's no historical evidence in this. So it's just, he said, she said, we don't know. But the story of King Arthur is deeply rooted in Celtic and medieval mythology. His narrative was actually interwoven with the elements of magic, prophecy, and mystical beings. The tales of King Arthur as his Knight of the Round Table are legendary rather than historical, some say, though this may have been inspired by real figures and events from the 5th and 6th century. And then you have Merlin and magic. One of the central figures that was associated with this, whether it's true or a myth, was King Arthur had Merlin, who was a wise, powerful wizard. And supposedly he used magic to guide King Arthur and protect the kingdom. And then that led to the Excalibur and magical objects. The Excalibur was the legendary sword given to King Arthur from the Lady of the Lake, a mystical figure with magical powers. And then the Holy Grail, the search of the Holy Grail, a sacred and magical artifact that grants divine grace and eternal life. And then the influence of Celtic mythology. And, okay, so this all interplays with the Templars because the modern culture, the Knight Templar and King Arthur have been frequently connected. Often through the lens of magic and mystery, the Templars, with their secretive nature and rumor mystical practices, have sometimes been portrayed as guardians or Arthurian relics, such as the Holy Grail and holding ancient knowledge passed down from King Arthur. And then some movies have been made, like Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, which draws the idea that the Templars held secret knowledge about Christianity and the Grail. Well, no matter what you believe, these are just some of the interesting topics that I've been reading on. And no matter what, though, there is proof that there has been magic used in England from kingships, like the roles of kings and queens using occult practices in England. And so we look back at King Arthur and the Knights Templars, we don't know if that was made up, or was it kind of made up? Was there actually a real person? But there was a King Henry VIII, and the year was like 1491 to 1547, and he is known from breaking from the Catholic Church, and he had significant interest in alchemy and the occult. Henry's court was a place of experimentation. It is actually said he employed alchemists to try to turn base metals into gold, as well as to find the Philosopher's Stone, which was a legendary substance said to grant eternal life. While there's no evidence that He actually succeeded in those pursuits. There's evidence that he actually did pursue to find those. Then take a look at Queen Elizabeth I, and the year was 1533, 1603. Elizabeth's reign was reigning and associated with occults and mystical practices. The queen herself was not only a patron of the arts, but also believed to be protected by supernatural forces. One of the most famous figures of her court was a magician and an astrologer named John Dee. He served as her advisor. Now, Dee was deeply interested in alchemy and astrology and the occult. He believed that his mystical practices could actually help guide the queen's decisions, and he was very famous for using astrology so that she could select the best times for important state events, including the battles and royal proclamations that the queen had to make. Dee also conducted experiments with angelic magic, is what was called to them, attempting to communicate with angels through a process known as cycling, which was using mirrors or crystal balls to see into the future. This connection between Queen Elizabeth and John Dee exemplified and blurred the lines between statecraft and magical belief during the period. And that's just an interesting read. The English Civil War and the Occult, 1642, 1651. There were instances where magic and mystical belief were involved in the political and military landscape. Some factions believed that there were certain individuals or events that were influenced by divine forces or supernatural powers. Now, the Puritans, who fought against the monarchy, and they believed strongly in the existence of witches and the power of demonic forces. Oliver Cromwell was the leader of the parliamentary forces and was said to have consulted astrologers and other mystics to aid his cause. And again, the Puritans was totally against this. And then I read some history things about the founding fathers and occult symbols. So the United States was founded on Enlightenment principles, but there were mystical elements connected to the early American leaders and their symbols. And some of the founding fathers, including George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, were associated with Freemasons, which was an organization with deep roots that some claimed had deep roots into the occult and mystical traditions. So Freemasons itself is often linked to secret knowledge, symbolic rites, and ancient mystical practices. And many of the symbols of the Great Seal of the United States, like the Eye of Providence on the dollar bill, have been connected to other occult traditions, suggesting a lingering influence of mysticism in the formation of the nation. John Adams was also a Mason. And many of the founding fathers had influence on the symbolism and philosophy in the early republic. Some believe there was a role in spiritualism in the 19th century. A belief in communication with the dead became a popular movement in America under Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president. He was reportedly interested in spiritualism and even consulted mediums during the Civil War. His wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, also believed in spiritualism and held seances in the White House, hoping to communicate with her deceased son, and some say even later after that. This is fascinating to read about this. The occult and American military. During World War II, some members of the U.S. military were believed to have been practicing mystical stuff, including astrology and divination, to gain insight into the war efforts. The most famous example of this work was General George S. Patton, who was deeply interested in astrology. He believed that astrology played the role in destiny. So there were magic and power and overarching themes in both England and America. But not just there. Many places. These were just some that I was studying and reading on. But in the Bible, the practice of magic and sorcery and divination and occult arts is generally condemned rather than endorsed. So, we're going to take this back up. I've went 20 minutes into this, but we're going to go, I'm going to do other parts of this. You're welcome to go check them out on my channel. And we're going to read some Bible passages about occults and magical arts and how it's forbidden. And I will have that linked below this video so you can go straight there. But I want to thank you guys for stopping by, and I'll leave you with this one passage. 1 Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who is a medium or a spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is going to be detestable to the Lord. Because of these same detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. So the nations before the Israelites, when they were going to the promised land, they were practicing these things. And they were clear that they were not supposed to practice them. So you can read about that in 1 Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day.